Hey guys, it's Darian, and this week for my discussion video I'm going to talk about just a few things from chapter 12. I'm going to try to keep this one short just because it is coming to the end of the semester and I know we're all probably exhausted. So the first thing I want to talk about is the issue highlight box from chapter 12 and about the Me Too and Time's Up movements, and how it kind of surprised me that the percentage for victims or women who came close to being victims in law firms was so high, because I do understand what it's like to be a female in the criminal justice system, and being in more of the law enforcement side of it, it's easy to see how that can easily happen. But for law firms, I didn't expect that number to be as high as about 60%, because personally I believe that I would assume that females are seen more as equals to males in law firms, but according to the statistics, they're still sexualized and victimized just as much as they are in about any other field. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the section on domestic violence, because currently right now, if you work in law enforcement, then you understand that with the coronavirus going on, most of the people, I know for at least our jail, that are coming in are either DUIs, PIs, but the majority of them are domestic violence, because we're technically only taking in people that are committing violent acts. So this one's always, I don't know, kind of like with anything else in the criminal justice system, it can be a double-edged sword. Personally, I'm happy that we have implemented the mandatory arrest, because I've heard stories from older professors about how when they were younger and they were either like in law enforcement or were lawyers for people in domestic lawsuits, back in the day, like it was just basically like you could beat your wife and just get away with it, and cops would be like, settle it yourself. So I am happy that there is the mandatory arrest requirement, but at the same time I've also heard stories from our patrol officers where it's like they get called to a domestic, and basically like the neighbors just kind of made a big deal about it, and it ended up not being as bad as what it ended up not being bad, and they still have to take somebody in depending on the situation. And another thing that surprised me was, I've always understood that males commit domestic violence acts a lot more than females, but it really surprised me to see the percentages from just 2003 that females were 86% of the time were the victims, as where males were only 14% of the time. And one thing from chapter 13 that I thought was interesting, I really liked that it touched on the history of racism in our judicial system when it came to African Americans, Native Americans, Asians, and Hispanics. And like how far we've came, because I feel like a lot of times textbooks or just like professors in general don't extend into, how the history of the legal system in Native Americans, Hispanics, and Asians. And I feel like, our entire lives we do learn about the racism in our country when it came to African Americans, and that is super important, but I feel like it causes us to overlook all the other acts of racism that we committed against other people and what we did to harm, what our ancestors did to harm them. So it was really nice to see like that inclusion in chapter 13 of other cultures and other races. And I did find it interesting in the Native American section how it mentioned that when colonists or settlers first came to America, you know, they saw Native Americans as being noble savages and noble of character, but as soon as the Native Americans wanted to keep their land, all of a sudden they became savages because the settlers were greedy. So it was neat to see how it showed, like, you know, things weren't always bad, but because of human nature and greed, it ended up developing into what we now know as Trail of Tears, sending them off to Oklahoma, and all the millions of deaths that white settlers ended up causing to these people. So didn't really have much to say for this week. I've been pretty busy, so I hope everyone does well on their final, and thank you for listening.